Hi there, and welcome to episode 70 of the Analyst Brief podcast, brought to you by the Cyberhut. My name is Simon Moffatt, founder and research analyst at the Cyberhut, and with me as ever is co-host Mr. David Mahdi. Dave, how are we doing?
Hello, Simon. I'm great. Just came off of a 3-week travel binge. Is it binge? I guess. I don't know, something like that. But happy to be back in the home office. But yeah, how are you doing?
Cracking the air mild. Yeah, binge indicates it's like an enjoyable thing. I mean, some travel is good, but I think 3 weeks is a long old haul. Where have you been? Where have you been on the roads? Where have you been traveling to? What conferences?
Yeah. It definitely was a long haul, and I was actually like in my head, I was like, "Is binge the right word?" So, because I agree with you. But no. Look, it was absolutely fruitful 3 weeks. So the first part was Transmit Security Sales Kickoff. So attended that. That was in Florida. So it was good to just see the team and, look at where the company's headed, the market, everything else. A lot of things going on, even as we came into that with cloud security and where all that's going and the implications to the security market. So there were a lot of discussions around that. And then as it transitioned, stayed in Florida and then attended FSISAC. So it's a financial services meeting. I think it's almost around 2,000 people, and that was in Orlando. Wow. Really, really good. A lot of just very focused folks there in cybersecurity and identity. Identity definitely taking a critical seat, if you will, in a lot of the talks. I had the pleasure of doing a talk on AI browsers and the implications to security, but in particular, not on the enterprise, consumers. Mm-hmm. And I did that with James Johnson. He's head of fraud at MetLife. So really well-attended session. Definitely, we can unpack that and talk about that because there's definitely a lot of concern with the cyber fraud identity community and saying like, there's a lot of focus on enterprise agents, and that's great. We need that. But there's not a lot on consumer use of these agents and how it's going to impact customer-facing digital systems, right? So that was interesting. And then just came back from the UK, so the London Gartner Identity Summit is very similar to the US one, which happened in December, but obviously it's contextualized for EMEA, for the European and UK markets. And all in all, it's not as big as, Simon, as the US one, but, really, really intimate. Got to see our friend from IKEA and lots of other familiar faces, vendors. And so it's just really, really nice kind of focused summit. And, I could definitely kind of rattle off some of the key findings if you want me to do that for that event.
Yeah. No, for sure. We're in the conference season, aren't we? We are recording a week before RSA and a few other things there. I think it's interesting. I think both of those conferences, I guess FSSEC, that's financial services, and obviously the Gartner stuff is identity centric. So they are quite specialist. That's quite specialized in their own world. But I guess maybe start off with the financial services stuff there around. You mentioned the sort of the browser stuff, which we've, I guess, touched on a few times in the podcast, but I think the interesting, the B2C stuff. And I was in a workshop last week. I guess one of the reasons I wasn't at Gartner actually, but in that workshop, just incidentally, we're talking about B2E and the metrics around B2E, which we've talked about again in the past. But for B2C, the transparency around identity working, it's really, really high. And by this, I mean, if we just put our consumer hats on just for a second and forget about our identity and security knowledge, we're all customers, we're all citizens, we're all consumers. And the transparency of our identity interactions, it's really, really high. So if the sign-up process is terrible, if the credential reset process doesn't work, if the fraud angle doesn't suit your needs, all of that, it's really rapidly identified as being a bad experience ultimately. So I guess, where does the AI browser stuff fit in there? Is it people sort of seeing this as that? I don't know. Is it the shortcut to improve user experience? Is it going to be the sort of de facto way of searching and managing and engaging online? I'm just trying to think, how does that, I guess, help or hinder that sort of B2C world?
It's a great question. I mean, so the title was like how consumer browsers are going to be the Trojan horse for AI agents.
Okay.
And so these browsers have agent mode. So if you open up any of these browsers, right, Comet, Atlas, right, from OpenAI, and you're going to see Chrome, and even if you go in the App Store and you look at the Microsoft's description of Edge, it says AI browser. So we're moving into this world now where the best way to think of it, Simon, is the evolution of how we've used the browser. And initially, if we go back to the 90s, right, there was like Alta Vista and Lycos and all these, and they were like indexes. Somebody had to go and index everything, and you had categories and all that, right? And you'd come up. It was like yellow pages, if people remember what those are.
Yeah,
and you click on them, right? And then Google had this idea of like, hey, search engines and categorizing things and using these algorithms. And they weren't like alone. There were other alternatives, but Google was the one we all know and remember now. And so we haven't changed from the search bar era in like 2 decades. And I remember Google's initial vision was like, we want to be your homepage, right? And so when you open up your browser, no one even thinks of a homepage anymore. When you open up your browser, like the first thing that I see anyways is a search bar. And I start with search. You're like, hey, I want weather. I want, a tube map. Like I need to get out, like you just search things. And then obviously we've all lived through the LLM evolution where it's like a lot of people are treating LLMs as just like another form of search. And in a sense it is, but I think many of us know now we can do a lot more with LLMs. But you take that notion embedded in the browser. So you still have the capability of search, now empowered with large language models. And that now gives you the ability that when you open up your browser, you can search for very specific things and it has more context. Cool. What I'm talking about now is the next level, which has come a part of this as well. And that is agent mode. So you can do things like I have a case on here, but these AirPods, I was telling the audience, I bought these purely with an AI agent. And I got them for $130
nice
US. And they were MSRP for $249. How did I get it for that price? I went into Atlas and I told it, in the search bar, I gave it criteria. This is what I want. And I didn't even give it a price range. I said, I want the best and most aggressive price you've ever seen for AirPods. And I want Apple Care. And, this is my location. So I don't want it coming from overseas. I want it particularly something in the US or whatever. And it said, would you like agent mode? And I said, yes. And would you like it in a logged in state? And I said, no. So I don't want it to log in. And I just sat back and I watched it do its thing. And it came, and I think Walmart it found, and it was $130, and it threw an Apple Care. And all I had to do was click the box to buy. That was it. And so when I've presented this a number of times, a lot of folks in the audience were like, oh, this is really interesting. But here's the thing. I've shown other people who are not tech savvy like you and me and like most of our audience, and they see that and they go, I don't need to learn about agent frameworks, MCP, Python, none of this. You just type in and it says agent mode, yes or no, and you click on it. And I've done things looking for flights, looking for the best connections, not just prices, but least delays, higher chance of like getting upgrades with points. Like these are things that you can actually even talk to it. You don't have to type. You can just talk to it. So the point is that, and I would say, Simon, just anecdotally, a lot of the people that I presented to at FSISAC and at Gartner, they just weren't really fully aware, because the amount of noise on enterprise agents is just taking up all of the stuff. And it's sucking all the air of the room, as they say. And the reality is that when you think about consumers, they don't have an enterprise acceptable use policy. They can try and do what they want. And the reason, if we go back to the search analogy for a moment, I was talking to a major US retailer and I was demoing some of this for them. And they're like, we haven't really thought about this. And I said, with those AirPods that I bought, I didn't actually have to go to Walmart's website. It just basically said it's ready for you right here. There was a Walmart page, but I didn't have to go through anything. Now, retailers don't like that because I can't be presented with ads and other promotions, right? Yeah. So, and then, but here's the conflicting element. I strongly believe, and I don't think this is a bullish prediction, I think this is immediately where the trend lines are going. Just like if you don't show up in search as your business, if your website is shut down to agents being able to talk to you or do agentic commerce in any way, right? Amazon was suing, was it Perplexity, one of them, over this. It's like, you're going to be blind to the internet. Because if I go on and just talk to my watch and say, find X product, because that's where it could go.
Yeah.
If you don't show up, if the cyber hut doesn't show up, you don't exist to me.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these folks were like, this is interesting. And then I'll just touch on this really quickly. And then furthermore, when we dive into the weeds of it, it's like, what are the implications? All of the stuff we've been doing for fraud detection isn't really going to be effective because device fingerprinting, what's a fingerprint of an agent running, right? Behavioral analysis and authentication. What's the behavior? Because it can throttle between acting like a bot, acting like a human, and something else that's non-deterministic. Authentication methods. Do you give it a passkey? Do you give it an OTP? What do you do, right? So really, really big implications. And I think I'll just give kudos to James Johnson over at MetLife and myself when we worked through it. We didn't want to just like make people panic. We wanted to say, look, number one, there's things you can do with your current fraud and identity programs today. Let's talk about how we can use those as your baseline, review things that could work with some modification, and then other things that you might want to, you can consider. And the net of it is always keep the human in the loop. Like, don't let any big transactions go through unless Simon is authenticated and coming in, right? So anyway, I'll stop there. There's a lot more I could go into, but
it's fascinating. It really is fascinating because you're right in that sense of, that the service provider, 10 years ago, it was all about, well, we had a loyalty program, for example, which was, physical loyalty card or whatever. And that was their first forays into B2C and trying to own and engage and interact with the physical person, the customer or prospect. And obviously it was like, well, we need to remove any of that intermediary sort of layering and partner referrals, anything like this. And we want the whatever insurance company or physical retailer on the high street to then own the relationship with Simon. So I want to service provide, I want to build an infrastructure and service my customer. I want to know everything about them, personalized experience, transaction history, all that sort of stuff. And it was all about building a direct relationship with the prospect and the customer, which is a perfectly legitimate model, and it exists and it's been successful. And you can then cross-sell, you can deliver that personalized experience if you know more about the person behind the transaction. Now, as you just described there, it's a real conflict, isn't it? A real counterpoint, because you're absolutely spot on in the sense of if you do want optimization and you suddenly want speed, productivity, everything else, you are happy as a prospect and a customer to I guess outsource some of that to an automated entity, and call it an agent. It may change, I suppose, going forward. So that relationship angle changes. It does alter hugely. Maybe there's some technical things around, maybe you can pass credentials through, and there's whatever, as you said, the human in the loop approval angle. But all of that old-fashioned stuff around one-to-one relationships, building the history, it's like, for some commodity components, if it's, as you say, based on price or context, or making sure you get your points on the transatlantic flight, and you're happy to sacrifice that and switch providers or whatever, it's quite a powerful thing. And I think it interjects a barrier between what has traditionally been the B2C interaction model around, making that closer, sticky relationship with the person paying the bill, essentially. But all of this, it's all undermined because of that asymmetric information. And I don't know the market. So it's like, well, I get stuck with my, whatever supplier it is, and I get to know them, and they just want me to be unilaterally focused with them. And of course, markets don't work like that, do they? So it's definitely going to alter, I think, how we do things, which I think is very, very different to what we've done in the past.
And I'd say just, for CyberHut, that's something absolutely to keep an eye on, because the consensus I got from Gartner US back in December, so I ran a little workshop on it along with Google. We did it together. And then again, this first phase of the year, and just modified it slightly, but the general takeaway is that, again, the enterprise agentic movement, whether it's in security, identity, or just the agentic frameworks, all of that stuff, really important. Can't take away from that. We need to focus on it and keep that going. But it's taking a lot of attention away from the consumers. And the reality is the consumers are going to be able to move way faster. The other thing is the operating systems themselves are building this in. You look at Microsoft and they're building Copilot in from the foundation. So AI is going to be everywhere, and it's going to impact enterprise identity. Okay, fine, right? But it's this massive gap right now in education awareness, and really like how to set plans forward in the consumer side. Again, I look at Okta and Ping and others, and they're doing a lot of advertisements on securing AI and everything else. But when you go into the details, yeah, sure, there's like standards and all this stuff, but it is still laser focused on enterprise identity, which again, I think that's going to keep them and others more than busy. But then it's like, well, what do we do as consumers? Because that's right now gonna absolutely turn that industry over. Like, how do you do IDV? How do you do fraud detection in this new world when we've leaned so heavily into human behavior, and we're still struggling with that? It's like, I think we can do lots of things to keep fraud levels at a good rate. We haven't eliminated it, but I think that's the concern. If people thought deepfakes were concerning, and they are, I think the agentic stuff is going to be crazier, because if I want to go after Simon, I now in the near future have the option, right? Just the attack surface to either steal your identity information, do synthetic identity attack, still do that. I can, do an ATO on accounts that already exist. But as I look at this right now and where this sits, and I project things out, I go, if I want to do a real ATO now, I just do an agent takeover.
Yeah.
Right. Because then now it's like Simon is empowering his agent to go and do something. Well, if I can get to that agent and I already have the access rights of that agent, then I can do a lot of damage, and I can do it at a higher velocity. Right. And now even coupling it with synthetic attack. I do synthetic attack and also create an agent that's a fake agent, quote unquote. Right. So it just amplifies the economy of scale. And again, with Claude Code, I could build this stuff really easily, right? I could do all this stuff without doing anything shady.
It is. Look, I think the B2C angle it's always a catalyst, because if something does work, is a tangible return on investment. So if you, as you said at the beginning, if you're selling something and you become sort of agent compatible, and suddenly your revenue shoots through the roof because you're searchable, you're found, your transactions increase. It's a revenue generating thing. It's a tangible, measurable benefit for you as a online service provider to say, I'm agent friendly, I'm agent interactive, I appear in search, I can optimize, I can sell whatever I need to sell to different markets, whatever. So suddenly that's a really measurable thing. And obviously, as you say, once that happens it is viral, because A, it's competitive, but B, it's a tangible revenue generating angle. But back to the adversaries part, absolutely, they always go to the weakest link in any security chain, and once they do, it's automated and it's exploitable to the nth level. They'll iterate to make it a revenue generating in that way, which we've seen that in a whole host of different attacks around. If you deploy passkeys or strong MFA or whatever, the attackers forget that and they'll go for session management. And if you've got good session binding, we'll forget that, we'll go further down they'll just go to the weakest part of that chain. And I think it's definitely becoming the sort of hose pipe analogy around, if there is some sort of weakness or vulnerability in that chain, think of it as a chain, like a micro attack chain, it will be identified and then exploited. So I think the conflict part is a difficult one around the sort of B2C user experience, because it's like it's undeniable if that starts to become the pattern du jour of, I'm not going to buy anything, I'm going to delegate it securely to whatever, my army of robots. That's a difficult thing to unpack, I think.
And I'm going to connect this to some of the themes from Gartner IAM. I mean, their whole keynote was about identity at the core, and they use Apple as an example, and saying like the Apple doesn't exist without its core, and just like digital business doesn't exist without its core, and its core is identity, right? And it's across the B2C side, the partner side, right? Getting partners involved, employees, right? whether they're full-time, gig, part-time, consultants, all of that, right, hinges on identity now also with agents and machines and devices and all these things. And so it's really interesting because I think the other thing that was said was talking about, Gartner talking about the identity fabric and saying that the industry has moved from like, we had these initial identity problems, and then we went and innovators went out there and they solved them by building identity products.
Yeah.
And we're in the transition from products to platforms. What we see a lot of legacy companies doing, though, is like taking products and just putting them behind curtains and trying to put APIs on them and make them like cloud ready. But they're still older tech, right? That will have to be modified. But they were saying, then the next phase is platform to like fabrics or mesh architecture, right? So it's more of, system-based architecture where things can actually talk to each other at a higher velocity. They're much more resilient, right? And so that, I think when we think about identity, just in what you were saying, is that if I just use B2C as an example, B2C is, you and I both know, and you wrote an amazing book on consumer identity, right? It was always like a use case, like vendors not that long ago would be like, here's our identity platform, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, this is all enterprise. And then I'd be like, what about your consumer use cases? And they're like, oh yeah, we've added those, like we handle those use cases. It's not really a use case. It's like there are organizations that do like trillions of dollars, right? If you take banks and airlines and e-com, like go through these channels, and we've trivialized it to just one little forked use case based off of an enterprise 1990s identity system. I think the technology is changing, but what encouraged me, just again going to this summit and then meeting with some of the banking professionals as well just before, is they are seeing that digital identity is like it's core to digital business, and that includes not just humans but machines and non-humans and all of that. So we're still in this phase, but I think I agree with you.
Let me ask you a question then. So you're absolutely spot on, of course. So there is a book on Amazon. It's been around. It's 5 years old, actually, my B2C book, and I was using it last week actually for a workship. Anyway, part of that,
5 years old. Look at that. We should do an anniversary.
It's an age ago, but the reason that's quite important is 5 years ago you sort of. B2C was still mature 5 years ago. I'm not saying it wasn't at all. But a part of that book was sort of introduced this concept around, look, you have B2E, employee workforce identity, which is an inside-out model. And by that, you have your employees controlled within a corporate directory and all the stuff we know about there. But your employees then go out of the enterprise to federated supply chain, business partners, whatever it can be. Now, B2C, of course, is the opposite around. It's an outside-in model. So you have your identities external to you, and they're coming into your organization to personalize experience, research things, buy things, government services as well. Don't forget those, of course. You're not selling, but you're having a citizen going into a government service for healthcare and tax and stuff like this. So it's an inside out versus outside in. So they're entirely just counterpoint models of technology. So there's a whole host of non-functional differences. But back to what you were saying, there's a whole host of entirely different metrics of success, budget, who owns this stuff, and how it's measured within the enterprise. Now, of course, B2C measurement, ultimately being blunt, is money. Does this thing generate revenue for us? There's fraud in there, and there's privacy, it's compliance, hopefully. But you're building the B2C to get closer to your prospects, convert them into customers, make revenue, personalized experiences, all this sort of stuff. But it's a very different functional thing. So anyway, so you got inside out, outside in. Does this sort of AI browser thing, do we have another flow here? I mean, we've got to think in information flows. It's still outside coming inbound, but it's like almost outside with like a bridge before it comes in, if you like, with this agent angle. I don't know, will it change things? Will it increase and put barriers between the service provider and the customer, or I don't know, what would you?
I mean, I think in time it could become something much more integrated and intimate, where if there's a way that it already knows that I'm coming in, maybe an AI browser or from my watch or a wearable, right? Or even talking to my car, it creates an agent that's getting tasks from me, and it just builds the agent. I don't even know the agent exists. And then that agent then can interact with another AI agent that's created in real time to respond. And maybe behind the scenes there's APIs, but we're not just like pushing APIs out there. We have like some interface of like how a human would answer the phone. It's like an agent gets created, an agent answers it, and it's intelligent on that business side, the service provider side. I think right now the way how at least we're recommending is, as we evolve, identify the human, identify the device that it's coming on, identify the browser, and recognize if it is an agent that's going to be working, keep the human in the loop to ask the human to do things. But right now, these agents would be treating it more like, just using optical character recognition, right? Like in lieu of having anything like that the agent can actually connect into, the agent's just going to click on forms, fill in forms using any of the context, right? But I think in time, there absolutely will be more of an intimate connection. And I think the businesses that in their respective markets that take advantage of that first will have better command, and they won't be blind to users saying, hey, S word, hey, A word, hey, G word, blah, blah, blah. And if they're not blind to it, they'll get results quickly.
I do wonder if it's a little bit camera diva. My camera needs an agent.
No, it's fine.
I think there's definitely an instance there in my head. I'm sort of thinking a little bit like TV and media channels. So, 30 years ago in the UK, you had like 4 or 5 terrestrial TV channels.
Yeah.
Then we have the advent of digital, which then amplified domestic channels to 15, 20. But then obviously you have satellite in there as well. So you can suddenly have 200 TV channels to peruse and to browse and to do whatever you need to do with. But then as a person, that's really hard to navigate, because there's no way you can scan 200 TV channels and work out where's my favorite show, what do I watch now. You're confronted by too much choice, right? Which is where the AI agent is now sort of reducing that problem down. Now, obviously, you spin forward even further, you then have the likes of Netflix and YouTube and all the rest of them. They've merged from being content supplier to content creator. So suddenly you have even more decision making to take place. And in my head, I'm trying to think, well, okay, where does that, I guess, lead to? Where does that optimization go to? And then you sort of have the TV guide that you go and buy from news agents that tells you what's on where, which is a bit daggy, I suppose, now. But then the AI agent is sort of taking that role and saying, well, you don't need to go and look at the TV guide. I can work out if you like the Premier League or if you like Sci-Fi movies or whatever. I'll optimize and do that stuff for you. So again, back to the search sort of angle, you need to be plugged in to how that agent is communicating, which to me sounds like it's just agent to agent stuff, isn't it? Your service provider needs to have a receptive agent providing information which the consuming agent requires, so you can have a self-optimizing competition, I guess, isn't it, really? And I don't think we're anywhere near that yet.
I don't think we're anywhere near that. And I think we're just, again, we're treating these like newer versions of search engines. I think it's going to be very choppy. It's too static. And I think, there's this big dichotomy between even some of the industry leaders talking about, AI and its use and its implications and what it's going to do. And I'm like, it's not the technology. The technology's never been the issue. Yeah, there's certain holdups to the technology. It's the implementations of it. It's how it's implemented and how we actually also use it, right? Consumers don't have to worry about getting business units together to figure out a data access governance strategy and all of the stuff with what data, should go in these models, what shouldn't, how it's cleansed, post-quantum, privacy, preserve it. Like, do you think they think that? No, they don't. They're going to open up, trust me, a year from now, they'll open up their phone, right? Like I have a Pixel, it's fully like Gemini embedded. and I also have an Apple device, right? And a year from now, I'm very confident that like I'll have more agent mode stuff built into my phone that I can just tell it, like, I want to find all the United flights that will get me from San Diego to, I don't know, New Orleans. And I want to find the ones that have the least amount of delays, best prices, and best probability to upgrade for this level of status and this many points.
And the thing that all of that is context led, because that, first of all, the results will change, which is fine, but your preferences and context will change, because that becomes essentially part of the query, to use a blunt term, because the context you provide, the problem you provide is going to be different. It's going to be totally different every time, essentially, because it may not be New Orleans, it could be somewhere else, and the parameters will subtly change. I think that's where the AI agent just will excel, because as humans we're not good at that sort of stuff, and neither are the service providers, because that's being built on linear interactions. Oh well, last time you wanted back to the Netflix thing, I guess, as most people are, I give up trying to find a film on a Saturday night. It's too hard, because I like lots of different films. So I literally now, the top 10 films in the UK, I said, okay, well, peer reviewed, ultimately, you sort of go through the top 10, you think, well, hit that, right, that will do. Because I can't wait to look, and you spend 30 minutes looking for the perfect film. So again, you sort of, that context it's personal to you, and it's nuanced, and you sort of say, well, let the AI agent figure that out for me. You provide those basic parameters and let it go.
That's the thing. Yeah. I want to go back, if I can. When you talked about the book from 5 years ago and the outside in view. The other kind of takeaway that I got also at the finance conference, and Gartner's been talking about this, and actually Akif Khan, like some of his presentations on IDV.
Yeah.
We're like less so focused on IDV, identity verification, that is, for like consumers, and actually more for employees. So when you mentioned this outside in, right, when you go to hire me at the Cyber Hut, and you're going to trust me for things, you're going to do some background checks. So you're relying on other outside in identities, right? Maybe it's a government ID, other forms of ID, bank IDs or whatever, that you then use to bootstrap your creation of ID. And that's where we're seeing like the DPRK attacks and everything else, because people are using synthetic identities to get in and get these jobs, these IT jobs and engineering jobs, let alone other types of synthetic identity attacks. And so that's also now changing that view of like, what does that actually mean? And in fact, when you think about it, the less, how would I put this? The less we as an industry leave customer identity to just like, if the business is there, then we'll cover it, the more risk we're at, because we just end up polluting all identity systems. And if I was wrong, we wouldn't have these DPRK issues. But I'm right. Because like we rely on customer identities to build our enterprise identities. So without having a strong notion of customer identity, forget about having a strong notion of that one. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's 100% spot on. Again, look, the non-functionals are entirely separate, but the concepts are highly relatable. And I think it's exactly the same with the AI, NHI. It's not going to be the same. You're going to have one system that does everything, but the same concepts have to be proliferating from the top downwards, the governance, the structure, and so on. And they are highly relatable. And the flip point, of course, is, the B2E user experience used to be terrible. Nobody cared about the employee user experience, because it's like, well, so what, your employee, do as you're told sort of thing. But now it's like all of your access governance, access request, all of that's, it's nice shopping cart style UI, nice dashboarding, it's on mobile. So it's a huge symbiotic relationship between what happens in B2C and B2E ultimately, because the personas are highly interrelatable, but not the same systems, of course, but the concepts
exactly,
and so on.
And I think actually in a lot of ways there's some inspiration we can get from partner identity, like B2B and B2C. Like lessons we've learned from B2E, but then taking those, and Gartner said this before my time at Gartner. They said, in the future, every user will be a consumer.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually when you actually truly look at zero trust, and what zero trust really like embodies. It's like if you find a good balance of like giving your employees, productivity and access to things they need when they need them, but take that zero trust consumer mindset. Like I'm going to treat you as a consumer, right?
Absolutely.
Not bog you down by these draconian policies that won't allow you to stick in a USB drive. And then it's like, well, then what do I do? Well, then I find other ways to leak information. I'm not leaking something, but if I'm trying to, I'm at a hotel and I need to print a form and my company won't let me use a USB, well, what else can I do? And then I can't use this and I can't use that. So I'll find other ways to get around it. And I think if we get inspiration from the consumer side, I think that's actually much more just in like
100%
approach. It's just more like applicable to where we're going with AI agents.
100%. It's and just to self-promote yet another book. My second book, looking at IAM 10 years from now, which is a total nightmare because it probably won't be anything like what I predicted in the book. But in honesty, the part of that, the sort of last sort of chapter or two of the book, we say, look, 10 years from now or whatever, 8 years from now, you're going to have an identity and you're going to have a piece of data and or a transaction. Right? They're going to be the two things which are relatively going to be around, static, whatever, in the next decade. Now, what happens in the middle is obviously going to be total chaos and entirely transformed. But if you think about the identity angle, you're just going to have layers, facades, personas, whether you are a consumer 1 second, an employee, a partner, an agent on your behalf as a customer, the whole rise of digital employees, so agents in the enterprise space. So that's going to be, is that a colleague or is it somebody working on your behalf? Is it a subordinate to you? So they're all just identity personas, essentially, doing something to gain access to a piece of data, complete a transaction or otherwise. But the identity concepts are highly, highly relevant across all of those different interactions, regardless of the persona type. Now, am I saying we're going to have one big identity provider and PEP, PDP that does all? Highly unlikely, or could be totally wrong. Maybe there's a big quantum meta machine coming in decades time. Maybe, look, who knows? Maybe so. But I think the concepts are highly relevant, highly applicable. How you deploy it, of course, is going to be back to the system of systems, fabric of fabrics to make it work. But the concepts have to flow from me as a carbon life form through my B2C personas, my B2E digital employees, and obviously my agents on behalf of me working in my B2C world and others. So I 100% see that. And I think there's definitely, we started off talking about the browser thing. I think that's definitely an intermediary technology to make it work. I think all of this it seems like a lot of meta stuff, and it's complicated, and you're trying to secure this stuff, which is really what we're trying to help with. I think you've got to sort of zoom out a little bit and just be aware that this type of transformation is happening, and not try and secure it with yesterday's technology, because ultimately that will not work. It's going to make the problem far too simplistic, and it's not a simple problem.
And I agree with that. I was just going to say a very simple point. It's like, we all know this, it's in front of our faces. ChatGPT was like the first to show us this new LLM/AI revolution, right? How did it start? Was it an enterprise focused company? Nope. Mm-hmm. It was consumer focused, and it was consumers that used it, that built it up, just like the iPhone.
Yeah.
Right. So again, I think if we look at like what consumers do, it's a big signal as to what's going to happen in the enterprise.
Yeah.
And technology used to be the other way around. It's the same thing when we look at military technology. They used to be the ones that built everything. And then over time, like the consumer landscape and enterprises inherited like those innovations that we'd get in military, and until to an extent. And I would say like there's exotic stuff for sure we don't know about that will probably trickle down over decades. But when we look now, drone technology, right, with the Anduril, I mean, like a lot of these things are like, NVIDIA is like very powerful, platform that has so many horizontal or vertical use cases from life sciences to military to all sorts of applications. So I think what we're seeing this kind of shift in the industry, and consumers are still continuing to lead the trends in these spaces. And I think it's like, if we really want to know what is going to happen with agents, I think we should take cues from the consumer,
Good stuff. That's a good place to park. I think that's spot on. I think there's clearly, as you said, there's going to be specific use cases and emerging from different areas. But the B2C thing is often built by needs, and there's that virality factor. There's the agility and iterative nature of things as well. If it's not working, it rapidly gets ironed out quickly because there's a tangible measurement if you can get the B2C stuff right. And I think that's it's an interesting place to park. So I guess yet another meandering episode here. We've got RSA coming up next week. You're going to be there.
Yes.
I guess we'll try and maybe do some stuff there next week as well. It's not quite far for you to travel. Slightly further for me, of course.
It is indeed.
Okay, but as always, it's going to be a hopefully interesting event. My prediction for RSA is everyone's agentic AI. Whether you do it or not, you're going to be securing it, give or take. I think everyone's talking about agentic AI, so that's be interesting. And it's always a broad place, and there's always some things that are expected. But there's always some surprises up here at RSA. There's always some good stuff in the sandbox and the innovation areas, and as always. So it will be good to see what is happening there.
Yeah.
So any quick final comments from you, Dave, before I wrap up?
No, I mean, I think it's looking forward to RSA. Definitely, swamped with some really good meetings and whatnot. So I think same thing. It's going to be interesting to see. As you were just saying that, Simon, I was like, did the agentic term? I don't think that was fully there last RSA. I think it was more AI.
It was AI and LLMs last time, and maybe
AI
RAG and MCP actually probably. RAG and MCP I think was the we need to skew with MCP. That's death.
So it'll be definitely looking forward to doing a post analysis with you on this. Not necessarily just the innovation, but also just on these taglines and where vendors decide to go.
100%.
And it's going to be interesting. Are they really leaning into agentic stuff? Are they going with AI? And when you say we secure AI, right? What does that even mean?
What does that even mean? I must say I'll be my pre-briefing because obviously on the analyst list for RSA, the pre-briefing sort of notifications. We want to brief you. Without a doubt, it's agentic AI is the buzz. A lot of these vendors, the interesting aspect being they're not necessarily coming from an identity perspective. Some have pivoted a little bit, which indicates what they were doing previously probably hasn't worked. But some look at it from a few different angles, maybe governance or discovery or data or how you integrate that with humans and stuff like this. But agentic it's a problem. And I think organizations know it's a problem because there's the shadow thing, but it's a problem because I guess ultimately back to what you were saying about B2C, it's a problem because agentic generates so much value. Now, we talked to OpenClaw a few weeks ago. It's this extreme example of a sort of consumer thing where it can do all this amazing clear your inbox and do everything for you. Now the security stuff may be terrible, but the benefits, the productivity and the are huge. So clearly securing agentic is a major problem because the benefits to business is massive, be it productivity, revenue, searching, querying, optimization, process optimization, and so on. So I think agentic is going to be the buzz next week.
The carrot is too juicy to deny it, right?
It's a 3-foot carrot.
It's a 3-foot carrot, and we're going to have to step over a lot of thorn bushes along the way. But I think over time we'll come up with the armor and the ways to avoid it. But it's going to take time, and I think we're going to. Like everything we've done in cybersecurity, it unfortunately takes one or two massive security vulnerabilities, or dare I say breaches, for people to then say, boards in particular, to then say, oh, wow, we need to do something, because they're always really slow to do something. We'll get there.
I think you're right. I think, well, let's leave it there as a highly technical podcast with the takeaway being it's a 3-foot carrot. And you need to get over some thorn bushes. So
yes,
just wrap that in a internal business case. send it up the food chain, and I think you'll be fine. It's a 3-foot carrot. Dave, thank you as always for sharing some commentary and words of wisdom on the world of browsers and agentic AI and the like. I think it's definitely one that's going to run, and hopefully maybe we find out a bit more next week at RSA and see what the scoop is there. So if you people are traveling, our audience, stay safe. Maybe see you next week somewhere along the road. If not, this has been episode 70 of the Analyst Brief podcast, brought to you by the Cyberhut. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Dave, for your commentary, and we will see you next time.